to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And for those of you who are living in the United States and tuning in and listening today, we're recording this the day before the U.S. Thanksgiving Day. So happy Thanksgiving to all of you, my fellow Americans. And we're so glad you were able to join us today. For those who are curious, I will not be recording tomorrow. I'm going to take the holiday off. I'll be back on Friday and we'll start up all over again with the next set of wonderful interviews and episodes and conversations with co-hosts and all the good things we do around here, including with my friend Jody Lynn, who is now, are you freezing? Last time you were freezing, I'm wondering, are you freezing? Because you live in Alberta and that's like freezing territory, right?
It is freezing territory, but it is plus temperatures today.
Wow.
Not very high, plus 4 degrees Celsius. So it is a warm day today for us Albertans.
So that's not in Fahrenheit. That's almost 40 degrees. That's a heat wave.
Yeah,
Wow.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the snow is going to melt.
Well, there you go. Now that is an optimistic viewpoint. I like that one. Really good. So wonderful. And then we also have a guest joining us today. Her name is Jennifer Rurka, and Jennifer is a perception facilitator. That's a great description. I love that one. People come. Notice that, Jody Lynn. I mean, you have done the same thing too because you're a coach. But there are a lot of coaches who have come up with really creative ways to describe what they do, and Jennifer is one of them.
Yeah, I loved it. I was reading through the link that Walt sent, that sends you to your website and all the information on there. I just really loved the way you describe yourself, and I'm excited about this conversation.
So Jennifer, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the program. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. Where are you, Jody Lynn, in Alberta? What city?
Just outside of Edmonton, about an hour northeast. I live on a farm.
Okay, because I'm in Calgary. Did you know that?
No way. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I thought you were in the States.
No, I'm in Calgary.
Oh, look
so
at
we're
that.
so close to each other.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have like a date one of these days or something. Meet in the middle.
Absolutely. I would love that. Yeah.
Me too.
The Canadians are coming. The Canadians are coming. I love it.
Right.
Fabulous. I didn't know that. That's great. That's really
Yeah.
So, all right. Now, there's always a story, and we like to start with a story. The story is what led you to become a perception facilitator, and we got to know what that story is because it's always juicy. So, tell us the story.
So, in 2005, I was bartending at the time, and my life was going very quickly in the wrong direction for a long time. I was going to work, and as a bartender, 15 shots of booze is really normal for a bartender. We start to numb out to that.
Holy crap.
So
Wow.
it was like you do that for a certain amount of years, and then you realize, you're masking some major issues, right? Nobody drinks that much unless they're really trying to run away from something, to bury something. And that's what I had been doing for years. But I didn't realize that's what I was doing, as silly as that may sound to somebody else looking in, because it was my familiar. It was just, I grew up with anxiety. I grew up with panic. It was very normal to me to just be in a state of fight or flight constantly. And so it was in 2005 that I had what I call an epiphany, but some people might call it an awakening. And I really believe that I physically died on my couch that day. Now, some people might say, well, a part of you might have died, like an ego, a part of the self. And sure, maybe it did. But when I was laying on my couch, when I got up that morning, and I remember I was so hungover, and I write about it in my book, that I was trembling and shaking so bad. And when I got downstairs on the couch, a few things happened before this, but basically, I heard a voice that seemed not my own at the time that said, "You're having a heart attack and you're going to die." Because I felt about 300 pounds on my chest all of a sudden. And I was to the point where I was paralyzed and I couldn't actually reach for my phone to call my dad or anybody else that lived in the vicinity for help. And so as soon as I heard that voice come in, there was almost a rush of panic, but yet at the same time, there was this calmness that said, yeah, and that's okay. And then
I'm
everything.
sorry, I got to
Yeah.
interrupt because unfortunately that fluttering issue we were dealing with before we
Oh,
started is returned.
it's back. It
Yeah,
has.
it's back.
Okay.
So here's what I want you to do. Go into to
Okay.
your settings there in StreamYard,
Okay.
and let's try resetting that that one setting that we changed, and let's see if that helps.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Oh, and
We
there's
wanna make sure
also
we hear you
echo
good.
cancellation. So if this doesn't work, because I already did it, I fixed it, that where you asked me to, but I can also try the echo cancellation.
Yeah, let's see what it does. Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's go the echo cancellation. So there, I removed the echo cancellation.
In fact, I just found out I was on the wrong mic too, so I switched over to the right mic. So this is a good thing.
Yeah, you sound different now too.
A whole lot better now, I imagine.
Yeah.
I was on a
echo
little tiny mic for my camera. It's not as good.
Does that sound better?
Yep, the noise
It
has gone
does?
away. So we'll go with that for a bit, and if we need to do it again, we'll do it again. But for the moment,
Okay.
we're good. So
Okay.
go ahead with the story.
Okay. So basically, yeah, I had that moment where I heard that voice, and then I felt, a rush of adrenaline that was quickly soothed by the voice. Yes, and that's okay. And then everything went white. And I mean, everything. Like there was no more condo, there was no more me, body, there was nothing. It was this vastness of just white. And it was a white that was so luminous. I don't know what other way to describe it. Like I'm rubbing my hands, as you can see, it almost like there was a feeling to it, like it's alive, this white. And so in my book, I call it the whiteout. Now, amidst the whiteout, there were two voices that came through, and it was a man's voice and a woman's voice. And as they were speaking at the exact same time.
Oh, wow.
So that's when I became, well, actually, that's not when I became aware. It wasn't until much later that I became aware that this was happening simultaneously and that this was the same consciousness. It wasn't separate. And then it was years later, 15 years later, that I realized that was the divine masculine and the divine feminine, or what some people would call God. And that there is no separation between those two states of consciousness or essence, or because it had nothing to do with sexuality. It was just this embodiment of masculine, feminine, the divine father, as I call it, the divine mother. And so when I say God, I mean union. This was a unified force, and there was no broken energy to it, no fragmented energy to it. So when I heard these two voices, I was in a state of, I wasn't wondering where my body was at the time. I wasn't wondering where the buildings were. I just felt, for the first time in my life, in a state of total and complete peace and love, like nothing like in the human. It's not the same, and it's very hard to describe until you're in it. But I was just at the most magnificent state I've ever been in my life. When I came out of that experience, my life changed dramatically. I mean, I went from
Before you go on, I want to ask you one question. When you
Mhm.
were in the whiteout, as you were calling
Mhm.
it, did you, as you think back on that, do you consider that to be an out-of-body experience, in body, or was body just like irrelevant?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. You know what? I think body was just irrelevant
Okay.
because there was no form anywhere. So
Okay. I was
everything,
curious about that. Yeah.
yeah, everything just vanished into the vastness of this white. Just this
Yeah.
endless, eternal whiteness, vast, going on forever. It seemed.
That's what I would call pure source energy, and that sounds
Yeah.
exhilarating.
Yeah. And so when I came out of that, I went, from drinking myself into a blackout every night to having zero desire to have a sip of alcohol.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is I didn't, when I was writing the book, I kept trying to recall what were the first few days like. And to this day, I still can't remember what were those first few days like. My mind, maybe it'll come back one day, but it's never come back. I just remember that it was several days later that I noticed things really beginning to change. The people in my life, how I was holding myself, how I was allowing people to talk to me because I was hanging out with quite an interesting crowd before that. And anyways, things just began to drastically change. And for the first year that happened, it felt like I had light blowing out the top of my head. It felt like there was a luminous light in my hands. I would be walking down by the river with my dog, and I just find myself sitting by the curb looking at a leaf that was stuck in between two rocks in the river. And then before I know it, 3 hours would pass by. And so I was just found myself very captivated by all these little things. And that went on for about a year, and I started having what I call a merge with people's energetic self or soul self. So I call them soul merges, where I wrote in the book, there was a certain story there where there was a guy that I had seen in the gym before but never met in the gym before. But he came up to me asking me if I could get him and his friends in for Stampede Week, which you'll know, Jody Lynn, is like a huge, big festival once a year here in Calgary. It's a big rodeo. And so the bar that I worked at happened to be a really popular bar. And he asked to get in the bar. He said, I heard you worked at this bar. Can you get me and some of my friends? And I said, absolutely. Give me your phone number. If there's anything that happens, I'll give you a call if I can't get you in. He put his hand on my shoulder. Thank you. Nice to finally meet you. Walked away. Didn't think anything else of it. I went home and I went to bed that night. And I kept a recorder by my bed. This is before cell phones did recording. And so I had a physical recorder by my bed because up until that point, it had been a few months since the epiphany, I'd been experiencing really wild dreams. So when I went to bed that night, I met with his conscious or his soul self. I don't know what even to refer to it as. But in that, he explained to me, his brother explained to me, his twin brother came in also on an energetic level and told me about the self-mutilations he had been performing on himself, how he was hurting himself, in other words, on a daily basis. And anyways, there was all these things that I was informed of that there's no way I would have ever known in a million years. I didn't know this kid.
I got to interrupt again because unfortunately our flutter's back again. See if we can. Let's try to adjust it one more time. We may have to do this throughout the show. By the way, this is par for the course. We have all kinds of electronic issues happen on this show because the vibe gets so high around here. I mean,
you know what? I just switched it to headset microphone.
Give that a shot. Let's see what happens.
I just switched it to headset microphone.
It's nice and clean.
Okay, because you know what? Let me just show you what that was on. Because that was on the audio. The other one is iPad microphone, so that's why. And I switched it to headphone.
All right. Well, let's go with that. Let's see. Maybe that's the solution. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So sorry, that was such a great story. I don't want to interrupt it, but I had to make sure we could hear you clearly.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, after that that experience, I got a hold of him because I had his number. I told him I'd call him if there was anything up. And when I called him, he was literally flabbergasted and hung up the phone on me.
Really?
And
Did you tell him what you like your dream or all of that?
Yeah, when I got on the phone with him initially, I said, I don't know if you ever have kind of weird dreams or if anything happens to you or I can't even remember all the way I was trying to gently go into it. Yeah. But the second I told him that I knew he was hurting himself in certain ways, like cutting his wrists. Some people do that. I think it's called cutting, hurt themselves, right? That's when he hung up on me. And so I took a couple hours because, and then when I called him back, he just said, I don't know how you'd know that. The only people that know that is literally my immediate family. And then him and I went on a journey together that was very transformational for me, very transformational for him. And he came out of that experience, and so did I, profoundly changed on many.
You're talking a spiritual journey, or you're talking a physical journey?
Both, because he would actually come over to my house, and I said to him, I have no idea how I'm supposed to help you. And this was in the early days before I began perception facilitation and started to really hone on what it was I was doing even. I had no clue at that time. So he would come over and we'd just have conversations where I was basically just listening to him. And then if anything would arise, I'd share with him what I was thinking and feeling. And then we actually, at that time, which is not something I do today, but I called some friends and we actually had a healing circle around him that was arranged through another woman that I know that actually did do some self-healing stuff. So it was really interesting. And then throughout that 15-year journey after that, it was a lot of ups and downs, dark night of the soul. Two that I can really recall that were extremely dark years for me. And so it wasn't like I had that epiphany and then boom, lights on, let's go. There were many, many dark times after that that I needed to fall down, come back up. I traveled the world hiring people I found interesting, not to recreate their modalities and teach what they were offering, but because I knew that they'd help me peel back layers of my own hardships and make me more vulnerable and be able to access and tap into my own inner teachings and abilities to not just help myself and repair myself, but to essentially and ultimately ended up helping a lot of other people and still does today. So that was the starting point to what got me into what I call perception facilitation, and then eventually led to me writing the book Soul Center.
When you said journey, I was thinking, we're talking like a weekend retreat. No, 15 years. That's one heck of a journey. Yeah.
It was a really long time, and it still is. Like, I'm still on that journey. So I'm still riding the wave, right? There's definitely ups and down days for me. And I find that, I don't know, for me personally, I was never part of an AA program, but my stepfather was an addictions counselor for years. And he used to say to me that people in the program that became, had a lot of years under their belt would become sponsors, and that you'd want to help other people because it helped you stay sober, essentially. And so I found that I got into the line of work that I am because it really helps me stay grounded in my body. Nothing to do with the alcohol, because the vibration changed once I worked through a lot of those emotional, negatively charged programs within myself. So that addiction left me essentially. But still, I find myself in times of fight or flight, riding the wave, going into my insane thoughts. What am I doing with my life? Where am I going? Why am I feeling this way? Having bouts of anxiety, but then being grounded again. And so using the tools that I've acquired over the years to do that, but also, like I said, working with other people helps to keep me grounded in my body and keep my train of thought in the right direction so that I don't veer off course again and get lost and find myself depressed and heavy anxiety or panic attacks like I had been enduring prior to that.
Listeners, I can't wait to ask Jody Lynn what her take is on this, because I imagine it's going to be pretty cool. So I can't wait any longer. I have to find out. Jody Lynn, what's your take on this?
I'm loving it. I think it's so cool, and I love how honest and open you are with your journey, and just I don't even know what the word is, but it's kind of like unassuming. Not a lot of spiritual teachers, but maybe a lot of spiritual teachers. Some of the spiritual teachers that I have met, let's say it that way, trying to be nice, they come off as like, I know everything and I don't need anybody to teach me anything. I will teach you. And your story is really this beautiful journey of learning, and you're so open about that. And I think it's amazing. I just want to hear more.
Oh, thank you, Jody Lynn. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. that clipping sound is back. We're gonna have to do another little adjustment, see if we can. This is gonna be ongoing. I can just tell. That's the way this show.
Really high energy. Yeah,
we are. Yeah. We're talking about stuff that's really high vibration, and once again, the electronics are saying, "I can't keep up. Help! Help! Help!"
Yes. Okay. So let me just adjust the.
You just cleared it, right? Whatever you did. Just
okay. So I'm just going to have to keep fiddling with those buttons still, all the same ones.
Just go with it for now.
I've got more questions, Jennifer.
Yeah.
So going back to I have many questions. The first one, going back to the whiteout.
Yeah.
Did you actually have a heart attack? Or do you even know if you had a heart attack?
I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, but I do know.
Did you get checked for it?
I never got checked for it, but I do know that the right side of my face slightly dropped. It was lower. So, when people have a stroke or things like that, that will happen. And so it was quite noticeable for the first 4 years after.
Wow.
And so over the years, it seemed to somewhat lift more again on that side for whatever reasons. I don't know, just the muscle, the circulation coming back to that area. But that was something that was noticeable that, again, I didn't think much about. Like at that time, I wasn't doing yoga. I didn't have any body awareness, literally. So I wasn't really thinking about any of that. As silly as that sounds, I was like, well, that's weird. But I didn't put 2 to 2 that maybe that was from having a heart attack, or maybe it was a stroke. I don't know. Yeah. But then when I researched it years and years later, you know, I was realizing, man, that's probably what happened to my face. And when I would go for acupuncture, I remember years after that, he always said, really, it's really odd that we're not picking up any energy, because he would put the acupuncture needles into certain points and put the little electrodes on it, and it wouldn't register on the right side, just on the left side. It would almost be flat on that side.
Wow.
So he really worked that side of my face for a year. And that probably, actually, now that I'm talking about it and reliving that, that probably helped start to activate the muscles there again more. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
That's crazy. Yeah.
It is.
Were you on a spiritual journey before this whiteout, or were you interested in like spirituality or like any of that stuff before that whiteout?
Not at all. Do you know what was interesting? I was listening to a woman the other day in one of my yoga classes. She says, I'm going to Peru in a couple days. And I got chills, and I was like, Peru. And then it took me back to when I was 15, and I read a book called The Celestine Prophecy. And I was 15 years old. And I remember just being, even now I have like goosebumps and chills, just so moved by that book. And I felt so alive, and it just resonated, like it struck the chord of truth in me. And I thought, I got to go to Peru one day. And it's really interesting that I still have never gone there to this day. And you know, that happened when I was 15, and I'm 45 now. But yeah, that was the only thing that I can ever really think about prior to that, where I had sort of a state of waking up inside of me, where curiosity to kind of dive into that side. But then it was, you know, I just sort of tucked it away as the months went by and forgot about it. So no, there was nothing in there where I was on a journey. Like I said, I wasn't even doing yoga, nothing at that point. So yeah, it wasn't until after that the journey started to unfold and begin to heavily roll from there.
Yeah. Wow. And I really commend you for, it takes a lot of courage to embrace what you did, like putting a recorder beside your bed to even listen to it, acknowledging that that's happening. You're getting information through dreams, and then saying something to this guy. Most people would have been like, I am crazy. And, you know, went on to something else. That takes a lot of courage to face it and to be like, okay, I'm going to go with this. I don't know, but it feels right. Wow.
It was so real. That dream that I had was lucid. And again, in the book, I actually talk about that whole experience. And in the dream, it was the first time I'd had a lucid dream, where I was in the dream and very aware that I was dreaming. And I was actually looking at the people in the dream going, do you know that we're dreaming? Like, are you aware that we're dreaming? You know, we're dreaming. It was just wild. And I remember walking to the edge of the building to show my friend that was with me in the dream. I said, I'll show you we're dreaming. And I walked to the edge of the cliff, and I turned around and fell off backwards. And I'll never forget the rush, the actual feeling of the air hitting the back of my head and then the front of my face as I flipped over, like almost couldn't breathe. And then yelling, stop. And then I stopped in midair, just controlling the whole thing.
Wow.
So it was when I floated back up to the cliff that the kid from the gym and his brother were standing at the top, and my friend wasn't there. And that's when they told me why they were there. Because I said, why are you here? It was so surprising, but again, I was very aware in it, in that dream. Yeah, it was very, very vivid and an interesting experience again. All these wild things were, like I said, happening so fast that year. That's why it felt like the light was blowing out of my head and my hands. Like I had zero idea what was going on. And one of my friends, it was her mom's friend that did Reiki. That was the closest we came to anybody that knew anything about anything spiritual. And, she had a conversation with her about it, but that was about it. So we were all just kind of lost with what was going on. And I guess the word would be tripped out by it. We were all like, whoa.
You'll need to adjust your settings once again. The flutter sound is back.
Okay. So let's go.
At least we know that there's a way we can temporarily get through. So
yes. Yeah. Okay. So I just adjusted again. So hopefully that'll be.
That's good.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you have more questions, Jody Lynn?
Not at the moment, but I'm sure I will.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all right. No, I can jump right in. That's not an issue at all. So this is cool. This is really, I love the fact that you have such a clear description of the lucid dream. We've talked to other people here on the podcast about lucid dreaming, people who have experienced lucid dreaming. Usually the descriptions are like third person kind of description. This is what happened, then I experienced this and I experienced that and so forth. But you describe it in a way that says, well, I leaned over backwards to prove that I wouldn't hurt myself by falling. I mean, that's a great description. I love that. And that tells me
fully aware.
It was a powerful experience. It was really, really a powerful experience.
It was really. And when I work with clients today, in what I call perception facilitation, that's not something that I can turn on yet. So to have a conscious merge with somebody happens very rarely. Very rarely. Like, I mean, maybe a couple times a year. So that's not something
that
happens.
Well, it's a couple times a year more often than I get. So
yeah,
I'd say that's wonderful,
Yeah. Where I'll have that sort of lucid state with them and they'll come to me. Most of the time it's meeting with the client, finding out what it is that they want me to work on, what are the emotional issues, what are the physical issues, and then sometimes things will come through and I'll just start telling them what's coming through in that moment. But it won't be the same as that lucid effect where I was in this state with their soul. And then other times it's like, go fish. I'll really have to sit and think about it as I'm looking at the list of what it is I'm going to be working on and where I'm going to go from there. And once I work on one program, and when I say program, like we have a thought, we habitually think the thought, it becomes a belief. Then when we start to reinforce the belief, it becomes a program, like a movie we're watching, like we're on the sidelines, sort of semi-conscious to the program that's running us. So if somebody comes to me with anxiety, that's a program. Somebody comes to me with digestion issues, that's a program. Cancer's a program. Everything, a bum knee, a bad shoulder. Oh, you think you got that from the car accident? Think again, that was the information leaving the electromagnetic field that affected the quantum field that drew to you what you needed to feel on a physical level, because that's the emotional implant that you weren't allowing yourself to feel. Now you're going to feel it physically.
In fact, even the car accident itself was also an example of another program that played out.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And so I even had a mom I was working on the other day, and I had been working on her optical migraines. So she would get, I didn't even know what that was until just like a couple of weeks ago, where they get migraines, but your eyesight goes all crazy and you can't really see. So you can't leave the house when you get them at all. You can't see nothing clearly. And so I'd been working on her, and she was getting migraines at least a few times a week. No migraines during that first week. Okay, still no migraines, and it's been a couple weeks. And then she told me about her 5-year-old daughter, who maybe goes number 2 once a week.
Wow.
And she's been like that for a long time. And so this, I think, was the 8 or 9 day mark when she expressed it to me. So I started working on her digestion issues. That's a program as well. Working into also stress levels with her. As little kids, we all have, it doesn't matter. We don't have to be adults to have stress going on. We can still be in that fight or flight a little bit more and need to relax and let the digestion flow. anyways, I started working on her. For 5 days in a row, she's gone to the bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't say to everybody like, oh yeah, like I'm going to be able to assist everybody on their journey, because there's been people I worked on, nothing's happened. And I just got to throw my hands up and say, well, the time's not right yet. You know, sometimes it's like you go to a workshop or you go to a seminar and you hear some information and it sort of sits on the surface level for a little while. And a couple of years later, somebody says the same thing and all of a sudden it penetrates into an understanding.
Yeah.
And then, but it had to sit on the surface layer for a long time to build, and it needed more experiences to come your way, so that we have these experiences and then they create understandings and knowings that eventually lead us to have that other information sink in. And so I always just say, hey, let's, you know, it is what it is. I don't want to try to overthink it, but majority of people that do come to me, I'm always able to usually help them with, if not everything, most things that they're coming to me with. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So what does that procedure or treatment like look like? Are you doing it with them? Is
No.
it something so it's something you're just doing energetically?
Yeah. So I've had clients that I've never met before, like clients that I've just spoke to on the phone. So I've just recently put up a website, but I never had a website before that. And the only reason I did it was for the book, right?
Yeah, you got to fiddle with the sound again. It's just,
okay.
Just start up again.
Sure. Let's just see here. So let's see if that goes.
I did it.
Okay. But yeah, so I have a web page up now, but before I didn't, everything was happening word of mouth. And so I was kind of relying on the word of mouth. I kind of lost my train of thought there. I don't know where I was going after.
We're talking about treatment and how
And so, yeah, I have clients that I haven't met before, but I've talked to on the phone. So I just focus in on the name, the first and last name. And so I'll meditate in the mornings. And when I say meditate, it's more so, so I ground into, as best as I can, the cellular memory of the whiteout, because that was the cleanest energy I've ever been amidst, you know. And so when I close my eyes and I focus, no matter what kind of chaotic day I'm having, most times I can go there and I can sit, not in that full totality because I'm not there anymore, but again in the memory. So it's like, that's what I'm saying, sort of the cellular memory. If I think back to it and really settle in, it's in my cells somewhere, the memory. And so I focus in on those programs, and all I'm really doing is essentially merging with the person. So I'm not trying to fix them. I just sit in the whiteout and I envision myself merging with that name. And so even though I've written my list of what I'm going to be working on before that, I just let that go and then trust that what needs to be aligned will be aligned in that frequency of the whiteout, which again was to me God.
Yeah.
That's beautifully described. I love that.
Yeah.
Really good.
Wow.
Thank you.
You do a nice job of taking something that's very esoteric and unique and has no clear adjectives and nouns to apply to it, and come up with some really good ways of describing it. Well done.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's been a lot of years. I've been doing the perception facilitation now for just over 7 years. And before that, I was doing more physical things like, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of body electronics. That was, you know, to all my travels, that was one of the more profound things that I tapped into, but it was very physically draining and exhausting because it was a hands-on thing that took hours and hours, where you'd have to hold different acupressure points on people's bodies and sustain it with quite a bit of pressure. So you'd be digging your fingers in quite intensely to the point and then holding it, sustaining it for 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 hours sometimes at a time until the point burned out. So you'd feel these volts of energy, because just like I am in the whiteout, we're acting as conduits to one another, even in the physical procedures. And then you go into a meditative state. So people on the massage table, and I'd be sitting in the chair beside them, would start going through different memory times. So one woman I was working on was all of a sudden saw herself running through the field and then falling into a hole where there was massive hornets, and she started screaming and yelling on the table, and then moments later she was in the teepee with this old sage. I mean, so can be some really wild experiences that people have, and then some that are flatline too. When I had experienced body electronics, I traveled to London, England twice to hire 2 different facilitators that were what I believe to be very reputable facilitators, and then another one in Australia. And so with body electronics, because it is a physical, hands-on thing, and you really need good facilitation, if you're ever wanting to look into that, I say really go with researching highly advanced facilitators like that I did. And the one that I appreciated them all and respect and admire all 3 that I got to see. But the one that I had the most profound effects with was with a guy named Peter in London, England. And if anybody's ever interested in contacting him or anything, you can always reach me on my website, and I can pass that information along to you if that does interest you, if you're researching it.
You've done some wild stuff. I mean, really cool, but really wild stuff. It's like you're fearless when it comes to exploring this stuff.
Well, do you know what? It was because I was in such mental suffering. I was so sick of just feeling angry, feeling depressed, feeling anxiety. When I married my husband, and all my boyfriends before my husband, feeling deeply insecure in all my relationships. And it was when I met my husband and got married to my husband that I was like, I can't stand myself for one more second. Like, I have to go out and fix this because I'm going to lose him. And I'm losing me in the process. And so initially I used him kind of as my placebo. I didn't realize it at the time. I was like, I'm going out there to heal my insane thinking so I don't lose my husband. And then throughout my years of travels to go and see all these unbelievable people, I realized, no, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for me. And because of that, when I realized that, my relationship with him just took an extraordinary turn, and he's just been such an incredible anchor in my life, and we've learned and grown through so many years of ups and downs, and he's been my anchor and my rock, and somebody that I can't believe how much he's supported me throughout my life. And
that flutter is back, so we need to do another quick adjustment.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
let's do it. This is okay. So I
hate to keep interrupting because
that's okay.
What you're telling is so cool, but I want people to hear it clearly.
No, it's all good, Walt. It's better to hear it clearly.
Yeah. Especially this story this good.
So there was a lot of journeying through my pain. Like I wanted to go out there. I wanted to find people that were going to help me, that I felt aligned to. And I wanted to go to people too that kind of made me feel uncomfortable. I think that oftentimes we're going to find teachers and healers that maybe we're kind of comfortable with and feeling a little bit fluffy with, kind of like hanging out with friends that never really tell you what they actually think. They just fluff you up, so you never really grow and evolve. But then, go hang out with your family and they'll make you feel insane, right? So it's like you want to hang out sometimes with the people that are really going to help stir up the deeper issues, the deeper rooted issues that you're wanting to work on. So
that's a very advanced concept, by the way. That's not the easiest conclusion to come to, because it means you're going to dive into that contrast. You're going to experience some contrasty stuff that isn't all that much fun.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're willing to do the work like I was really serious about wanting to feel better.
Certainly.
And I still, like, anytime anybody tells me about anybody that's an amazing body worker or energy healer, anything, like, I'm like, what's their number? Where are they? Like, I have to go and see them, because we're always learning and growing and evolving. And especially, you know, as energy workers, right, Jody Lynn, as you know, it's like we're never going to stop learning. We need people to work on us too, because
Absolutely.
oftentimes what it is we're working on, we have a stagnated lens in front of us, and we need somebody else to help see their way through that, like we can do with clients, because we're not caught in the stagnated lens of what they're seeing and thinking and feeling. So it's easy for us to reroute and help them, just like it's easier for outside people to help us.
Yep. Absolutely. They see your blind spots before you do, because you're stuck in it.
Yes. Oh, I like how you put that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So with your work, it's more of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more of the cellular perception that you're shifting. Like that will shift the thought, the emotion, the memory, like all of those things. It's kind of like a domino effect. But that's where you start, where a lot of coaches will start with the conscious version of that perception. Is that correct?
Sorry, that's my dog digging on the couch. Is that bothering the background there?
It's very faint. It's not bad.
Hey,
So
Sirius,
right.
Stop that. Okay, listen, stop digging.
Seriously, Sirius?
Yeah, seriously, Sirius.
He just wants to have the attention, right?
He does, right? It's all about him.
And it worked beautifully, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just saying, you know.
But in a nutshell, like, can you ask me that question again? I'm sorry, Jody Lynn.
So with the perception shift, it's on a cellular level that you're shifting the perception, or that's what I'm feeling from you, is what you really do is shift that perception on a cellular level, where most people, or a lot of people, coaches, healers will now, maybe not so much healers, but a lot of coaches will work on the conscious mental perception and shift that. So you're going to this deeper cellular level where it almost began, I guess.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I go kind of behind the scenes to the program that's running. And the way that I see it is the energy is like a wheel, like it's moving to the right. And so as the energy spins to the right, it gets tighter and tighter, kind of like tightening a screw, right? When you tighten a screw, it just gets tighter and tighter. So that programming gets so tight. And I think that's why sometimes I can't unscrew it, like with some people. So when I come in and energetically stall that program, it merge with that person. It's kind of like a cork goes in the wheel, and it holds it in place. And then the wheel keeps trying to turn back to the right. And it won't turn. So there can be sometimes a little frustration the person can feel in the beginning, because it's like survival of the fittest. The program's like, no, I'm going to keep going, but it can't.
Yeah.
And so eventually, not only does it stop, but it starts to spin to the left. And that's the unwinding. And that's all of a sudden when people start feeling normal. So I always tell people, I'm like, don't wait for a UPS parcel to show up at your door. It's nothing tangible. What's going to happen is when I stall that emotional program, your body begins to heal and repair itself. So I'm not coming in to heal the body. I'm just stalling the program, and then your body repairs itself. So now your brain's going to produce different chemicals and hormones for you to think differently and feel differently. So I'm not changing your thinking. I'm just simply pausing, stalling the program, and now you get to be Jody Lynn or Walt without that program running you. So you're automatically going to feel more like you. So it happens so subtly, so people just feel normal. So there are stuff that I do psychologically. Like I talk with the client every week, once a week, to find out how they're doing. Like, how is the adjustment done? How has it impacted their life? And because this is happening so subtly, sometimes clients are like, oh yeah, no, I don't notice anything. Everything just feels normal. And then we start going through their week, and it's like, oh, well, actually, no, I didn't react the way that I normally would have at work. Oh my gosh, let me think. Oh yeah, and then I didn't react this way. And oh my gosh, my digestion is better. Oh, wait a minute, my sleep was better. So I always tell clients at the beginning, and oftentimes they'll forget, and then I'll remind them, keep a journal, so that after the second day or so that I start working on you, because it takes about 24 to 48 hours to really start to notice, keep a journal where you're just saying, by tick
Jennifer,
form.
I got to interrupt. I'm sorry, but the flutter. So do the adjustment, because what you're talking about is so important. I want to make sure we get it.
Okay, so let's do the echo cancellation again there.
Okay.
But so essentially, I'm just talking with these clients once a week. Find out, they go through their journal so they can let me know what they've noticed that's changed in their week. They can keep up to date with it, because when they see what they've written down, we tend to act like goldfish and forget every 3 seconds. So if we don't write these little subtle things down, we forget. And then by the end of the week, it's like, oh no, nothing's really happened, until I start to go through the week with them. But then there's all these other little things that they might have missed. And when we write it down, it's really important, because when you write it down and you look at your writing, your mind can't argue with what you wrote down. It's your writing. And then you're like, oh yeah, there actually was quite a few subtle, little, tiny things that happen that are accumulating to big things. And as you're looking at that list as the weeks are going by, now the brain is really starting to catch up with the momentum of change. It's actually seeing the evolution of change through its own writing. So there's all these things that come in combination. And so when we talk, sometimes I'm just finding out where to adjust. What do I need to increase? What do I need to decrease? Where do I need to go next? Because everything's like a string of pearls. One thing is attached to another thing that's attached to another thing. So you move one program out of the way, and then maybe it slips into something else. And now we're working on that something else. So we never really know where we're going to go until we start going down the rabbit hole, right? And then also during that, what I call catch up, once a week, we might be processing what's happening with their spouse, what's happening with their kids or work, or they just want to talk something through, because now that they're in a different headset, things are starting to shift. So we just start processing things different. So I help them to psychologically be able to process and understand things with their new eyes.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a combination of energy and psychological. And when those things happen, you know, when these programs aren't running us, our perception literally does change. So that's why I call it perception facilitation, because and again, I don't heal the body. I just come in as a facilitator to facilitate stalling that program, and then the client's body repairs itself.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you describe this stuff. I really do. I mean, earlier you were describing about how, well, it goes to the right and it gets really tight, or it goes to the left and it's unwinding. You have orientation, for goodness sake, on what you're describing. That is so great. And it doesn't even matter if the rest of us are experiencing left or right. You're experiencing it. And by describing it, you're bringing us into it. That's just one little example of it. But it's kind of like what you were talking about with the journaling. You journal to remind yourself of the little things that happen, but you're including all these little details. That's the juice of the story.
Yeah.
That's really great. You're doing beautifully. Yeah. I just had to make sure I told you that. You're doing really, really well.
Thanks, Walt. I really apprate that.
You are.
It means a lot to me. Thank you. Thank you.
I think I've also figured out too. I think it's a 5-minute loop on that distortion.
Audio.
So if I'm right, in about 1.5 minutes, the distortion is going to be back. Well, we'll see if that theory plays out.
But I'm fast now too, right?
You are, yeah. Okay, Jennifer, hit the button. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm going with it. Yeah,
we got this.
This is just making us listen more intently, right? So maybe that's why this is happening today, because it's like, listen up. Right. So I don't know.
It fits so perfectly, because you had this whiteout, this amazing, powerful, high energy, high impact experience. And then you've gone through a bunch of other teachings that you've literally sought out and learned how to basically include them in your own life and include them in your own experience. And then you have shifted over to learning how to basically include the benefit of them in other people's experiences. And in that process, you're going through these very, very intense situations and learning how to navigate them. That navigation that's the whole deal. I mean, you guys are both coaches. You know what it's like dealing with clients who are struggling, they're stuck, they're dealing with things. And anytime that we are, as human beings, in that stuck place, especially if we have had some learning, we've listened to a podcast, or we read a book, or we took a course, or we worked with a coach or something like that, we know better. And yet we still end up doing the same kinds of things, and we get frustrated about that. That's why I'm harping so much on the detail that you're throwing in here, because those details make it easier for somebody else to say, oh yeah, I had something similar to that, or this kind of cues it in my mind that there was this other thing going on. And now all of a sudden we're bringing in data that wasn't there in our conscious minds before.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is like the biggest takeaway. I mean, you had all these cool experiences, but basically you were gathering new data and integrating it. And you're continuing to do that, not only for yourself, but also for your clients. That's fabulous. I love that.
Yeah. And I like how you say that, because that's really a lot of what my book is. It is a lot of new information. Like, sure, and like in the book, I give a couple methods on how to help people, how to show people how to feel their feelings through. So they're essentially deactivating the negative charge that's surrounding the feeling, that's making them feel prickly and uncomfortable in the first place. And so when we deactivate that negative charge, we essentially have felt the feeling through, and it's no longer bothering us. That feeling is allowed.
It's actually now a 6-minute cycle, but yeah, we hit it. So
yeah,
adjust it once more.
Yeah, okay, let's adjust once more there. And so you know what? I'm going to actually take this one thing out and plug my battery in. So I'm going to take off the headset because
right when my battery doesn't work too good. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. Can you guys hear me good still?
Yep. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So, but yeah, so essentially my book is all about new information. Like, I'm sure a lot of us have heard, okay, let's feel our feelings, but nobody's really ever explained how to feel them through to the other side until the feeling is completely exhausted. And I believe that it's because that we just have these little mini tantrums, like, oh, okay, I'm going to feel this, but we don't actually allow the feeling to take us on a journey to tell us its story, so that the feeling is completely moved through us and exhausted us. Because we haven't been given sort of a layout and a step procedure on how to do that, our feelings, we still feel overthrown by them. So essentially when I wrote this book, I was writing it with, hoping that maybe it would first just help my clients, right? Or I could give this to them and then they would have a better understanding on how to maybe start working on their own selves, to waking up to the fact that they understand they are the ones that are repairing their bodies. And so the more that we start to move this programming out of the way, and we do that by feeling our feelings through, the more that we realize we are healing our bodies, and that the thing that's making our bodies sick and the thing that's making us feel emotionally paralyzed in our lives is the fact that we're not accessing and feeling our feelings, right? We've built upon a society that's like, don't react to that. Oh, and in the spiritual community, only think positive thoughts. If I only think positive thoughts, then what's going to happen? I'm going to create a big gap within myself that's a lack of self-acceptance, because I'm saying, I only accept certain parts of myself, and I will not tolerate these other parts of myself. Therefore, I will not accept these other parts of myself because I'm making them bad. They're not positive. Therefore, I'm going to be a conditional person. And so, of course, I'm going to conditionally love you. And of course, I'm going to be a slave to my environment. I'm going to need you, Walt, and you, Jody Lynn, to constantly be telling me what a good job I'm doing so that I feel accepted. But I'm getting it from the outer, which is an empty hole. It's a black hole. It's a void that consumes energy. It's not battery operated. So until we actually accept all of ourselves, which is what we do when we essentially feel our feelings through, and that's a part of the SIT method. Once we do that, we are accepting all of ourselves. Therefore, now we're full of self-acceptance. Now I don't need you to constantly be filling my cup. Now I'm becoming a battery-operated mind that's an inspiration. And I don't have to say anything to anybody because I'm leading by example. And that information is leaving my electromagnetic field, affecting the quantum field. And it positively charges those around me to want to do the same for themselves. So we're not taking from one another anymore. Instead, we're showing up for ourselves, and that helps everybody. It literally begins to end the war inside, so the war out there collapses as well.
Yeah, you're overfilling your cup, and then it is flowing onto the world around you. That's beautiful.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
I love that, because we've heard so many different times from many different teachers that you don't want to try to control the external world. You simply go in and you assume responsibility for the internal world, and then the external world takes care of itself. You just described beautifully how that works, though, without actually saying that.
Well, and you realize too, like the only thing that ever makes us feel powerless is the belief that we need to control people, places, and situations.
Yeah, sure.
We're giving our power out to them. But the more that we feel our feelings through, the more power, that's the battery operated that comes in, the battery operated mind. We're no longer a consumer trying to consume other people's energy. So the more that we feel our feelings through, the more powerful we become. And we realize we are in control of our lives. So therefore, we don't need to control anybody now. It's like the desire to control subsides, and we realize that we actually are the creators. Whereas when I need you to fill my cup because I have that lack of self-acceptance, I'm always going to feel powerless. I'm always going to feel victimized. I'm always going to be reaching outwards and feeling empty, right?
Well, and if you're not accepting yourself, you're putting that out into the world. You're asking the world to accept you, but you can't even take the first step and accept yourself. So you would be regenerating that pattern over and over and over again in the outer world of people who don't accept you, because you need to learn how to accept yourself.
Exactly, Jody Lynn. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
100%.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So do you go through the SIT method in your book?
I do. There's the SIT method part 1 and the SIT method part 2. And the SIT method part 1 is just essentially it helps us to become aware of the time zones that we're in, how we start to understand how all time is happening simultaneously, and that the past is not something back behind us that we can no longer get to, that every time we feel controlled where we are right now, the past is overriding us today. So all time is happening simultaneously. And so it also teaches us how to put the positive side of the battery together with the negative side. So as the negative is coming up, let's look for the positive, not to deflect, but instead to fuse the two ends together to create that battery operated mind that's not trying to consume those around us. And then when we get to SIT 2, we have a really great foundation and understanding of how time works, the benefits of what happens when we surrender to the feelings and how to feel our feelings through, and how when we do that, we can actually move through time in a way that we would have never imagined. For example, one of the...
I gotta interrupt again, guys. Set the settings.
Okay, for sure. Let's do it.
Especially since you're about to get into another cool story. We can't miss the cool stories. I mean, no.
But so in the book, I explain when my dog Abby died, and I actually dedicated the book to Abby. I don't have kids, but she was literally the closest thing to my daughter. This dog was my soulmate. Like, I went into massive panic attacks for 10 months, and I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Daily, from morning till night sometimes. And so I dedicated the book to her because SIT Method 2 was born out of absolute terror and grief. And if she hadn't passed, I wouldn't have been able to write the book the way that it's laid out now. So there was so much growth in losing her, so much transformation in losing her. But oh my gosh, I just lost where I was going to go.
That's all right. That's one of the rare times when you lost the thread of the story again. That's totally forgivable. Because this has been such a good story. Well, tell you what. Go ahead.
Go. Remember, I was going to say, so when she passed, I had already gone through several months of panic attacks and anxiety, and I was so freaking exhausted. And SIT 2 was born when I got up one night, and I was so angry because I literally would go to sleep for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and I'd wake up in a panic attack. Like, I'd literally wake up in them. And I went downstairs on my couch, and I'm like, I'm so exhausted. Like, I am so tired of being tired. And I remember going, okay, well, what does that feel like? What does that sound like? And I picked up my pen and I wrote it down. I was like, what does that sound like? And then I made a fake baby sound. I don't know why, I just did. And it was like it was like the lid popped off when I did that. And I started bawling my eyes out and like wailing, like actual baby wailing sounds. And when I did that, I lost time in the sense that I don't even remember how long I was lying there crying. But all I know is I was sitting with a moment where I thought I was I thought I was like, okay, I'm going to feel this frustration. What does it sound like? And all of a sudden my frustration went into another memory within however long I was in the crib. And I must have been between 1 and 3 because I was standing up and I was holding the bars so I could stand. I know that. And I was screaming, somebody pick me up, in my head. Okay, somebody pick me up, somebody pick me up. And I was like, I'm so cold. I'm so cold. My skin hurts. I must be disgusting. Nobody wants to pick me up. I'm so gross. I remember thinking this. And I never had that memory before, never in my life. But because I let myself fully surrender to the feeling that was coming up over just feeling frustrated because I was so freaking exhausted from these panic attacks and so just devastated with losing Abby, just letting myself feel that, time collapsed. And all of a sudden, here I am in my living room I was born in 77. It must have been 1980 or something. And now all of a sudden 1980 is in the room with me. Time is happening simultaneously. I didn't stop what was happening and say, oh, I better write this down. Oh, what time is it? There's no conditions and judgments allowed. So you just have to go with it. And so I didn't even understand any of this at the time. I was just going with it. So as I felt that feeling through, before I knew it, I was lying on my side on the couch, on the same couch I'm sitting on now, and I was in the fetal position, and I realized that I felt really calm, and I was rocking myself in the fetal position, and all these tears, like my whole face, the puddles of tears were there, and I remember going, and I just felt at peace. So what had happened is like in the sit method part 2, it shows us how to access the feelings now, and then sometimes it'll take us to other memories that have been following us for years with other layers of existence on top of them, masking what was really hiding. And when I deactivated that negative charge, that's when the panic attacks started to slow. They pretty soon, within a couple months after that, came to a halt because I kept sitting with it, SIT. So that's an acronym for see it through, it being the negatively charged belief. And the more that I did that, the more the panic stopped. And along the way, I dipped into sits where I was experiencing massive bouts of terror, of dying, like all sorts of things, you guys, like that I was going through. Somebody would trigger me at work and I'd feel rejected. I'd go home and feel rejected, and then rejected would take me to complete terror of something where I was screaming and crying. And again, no judgments, no conditions. I'm not setting a time limit on it. I would go with it. And once the feeling exhausted me, like it did when I was laying there in the fetal position, not trying to end the session, it ended. And when it ended, right, the negative charge was deactive. Now I was in a neutral state of being, right? And I was calm, and now that charge was no longer in charge of me.
Oh, I like that.
No longer, my power was no longer going out. Now I had the power to understand what was actually going on, right?
Wow, that's beautiful, really Jennifer.
Yeah.
Truly beautiful. Yeah. The book is called Soul Center, and you have a coaching practice that you call Perception Facilitation. If somebody wants to find out about that, how do they find that?
So you can find me at my new website.
And before you do that, got to do the adjustment. We might make sure to get this clear.
Okay, let's get it clear. Okay, so there's the echo cancellation.
There we go.
Me at my website at jenniferrurka.com. There's a contact there, and it'll go to an email, and I will get back to you as soon as I receive the email.
Beautiful thing. And we'll make sure we'll include a link in the show notes too to make it easy for people to get there.
Thank you.
Wow, this has been fabulous. This has really been fabulous.
I've had a great time.
You agree, Jody Lynn?
Oh yeah. I think it's astonishing how much trust, how much faith you had in just going with it. Because most people do not. And I think that is the hardest thing. Part of my practice with the coaching I do around money and abundance is about feeling your feelings, because I agree with you in the sense that we've been so conditioned to stay positive, stay positive, stay positive. And the way that I describe it is it's like a blender. Your feelings are like all the juicy goodness that you put inside of there. And then you don't wash your blender day after day after day after day. And regardless how much good stuff you put in there, it's still going to smell and taste like shit, because you're not letting that other stuff go. We're just kind of stuffing it down. And it was a hard thing for me to learn. So I just love how open you are about your process and how much you trust just the universe, just where you're going, that it's the right direction. All of that is incredibly inspiring.
Thanks, Jody. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
We appreciate you as well. By the way, there's one other thing that we make it a practice to do here. I make it a practice to do because like so many wonderful people who are giving, they come onto the show as guests or as co-hosts like Jody Lynn. The people who are the givers often are touching the lives of people that they'll never meet and they'll never see. And you're one of them. And you never really hear this. So that's why I make it a practice on their behalf to thank you for what you're doing for the people that you'll never meet and that you'll never see. Because you're touching many lives in many ways that you don't know about, but it's happening and you deserve appreciation for that. So thank you. And thank you for what you'll continue to do.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you. I feel so blessed to have had this experience with you guys. Thank you.
It's a mutual feeling. Awesome. It has really been awesome. It's been fabulous. So thank you guys very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.